Anarcho-Syndicalism at Edinburgh Anarchist Feminist Book Fair 2021. If you're joining us for the first time, please take a moment to look over our Safer Spaces agreement, which is available to read on our website. And I'm just gonna drop a quick link in the YouTube chat as well. And on the website, you can also check out the book fair stalls and the full program for the weekend. We are nearing the end of it, but there are still quite a few really cool events this evening as well. And as ever, the book fair is made possible by people giving their time and labor. So all donations we take go directly to the speakers and organizations taking part. So if you can, please consider donating via our PayPal. And I'll also add the link to that on the chat as well. And we're always keen to hear feedback about how we can improve the book fair next year and make our programming and our spaces more accessible. So if you have thoughts you'd like to share after the event, please drop us a line via the feedback page on the website. And yeah, without any further ado, I'm going to be handing you over to Tony, who's here from Solidarity Federation, along with Jacques. Tony, welcome.
Welcome. Am I ready now? Yeah.
Yeah, go for it.
Hi, everybody. My name's Tony Crowther. I've been involved in anarcho-syndicalism and workplace organising for 40 long years. Today, I'm going to give a basic introduction to anarcho-syndicalism. And don't worry, it's not going to be too complex, else I won't understand it. Okay, so I thought I'd start with anarchism, defining anarchism from my perspective, or the perspective of Solidarity Federation. Anarchism can be summed up in a word, really: freedom. Anarchism seeks a world where humanity is totally free, a world where each and every individual can have fulfilling and meaningful lives, a world in which all the vast resources of society are available to each and everybody on equal terms to develop their individuality, to develop their skills. And in developing their own skills, they pass on big resources and expand society to be available to the next generation of people. Yeah. So anarchism believes in freedom, and what stands in the way of freedom? Oppression in all its forms: political, economic, social, physical. Oppression, it limits lives. It stunts people's individuality. It's the very negation, the very opposite of freedom. And when I was thinking about what I was going to talk about today, you know, sometimes these words they get lost, you know, oppression. So I thought I'd just kind of draw on my own background, really, to highlight the effects oppression can have. We weren't a very adventurous family. With 3 generations of us live on the same estate. I actually moved about 200 yards. I could still see my mum's house from where I live. So there's no seeing the world for me. But looking how it's affected us, if you take my mother, there were 6 kids. My mother's life was very much taken up with feeding and clothing us, really, as kids. I can still see her now. Every Thursday night, without fail, she'd be there doing the accounts, trying to make 2 and 2 come to 5. So it was kind of a constant struggle. Take my own upbringing. I was at school at a time when terms like retired, backward were used. The school I was in the class I was in was called lower removed. That's in a secondary modern, so you don't get much lower than that. Interestingly enough, in lower removed, you know, they used to give us reading to ourselves, quiet reading, but none of us could actually read. The really good old days. And when I left school, I went on building sites where what little confidence I had was knocked out of me, really, by bullying foreman. To be honest, if I hadn't got involved in workplace organising, and if I hadn't got involved in anarcho-syndicalism, I still think I'd be going around thinking I am retarded, I am kind of backward. So it was only through that I got confidence. And if you look at my poor nephew, my nephew left school and started working repairing refuse trucks, dustbin carts, what you want to call them, yeah. And they privatised it. And the first thing they did was get rid of all the council staff. And he just couldn't cope. I mean, he started suffering depression. In the end, he drank himself to death at the age of 45. And if I go around the estate now with the kids, with the so-called chavs, with the, you know, they're moody, they hide their confidence, through anger about everything, really. And I wonder what hope for them. I mean, when I was growing up, there was at least jobs. I mean, the estate where I was built was there to provide workers for the massive factories in Manchester that employed thousands of people, and they've gone now. So what future for the so-called chavs? I don't think there is much future. I think they're just kind of they're surplus to requirement. So it was that really that drove me towards anarchism. This kind of my background really, because anarchism approach to oppression, all forms of oppression, was something I could relate to really, and it was able to direct my anger, my frustration into something really positive. So anarchism opposes all forms of oppression. I mean, if you want to sum anarchism up, you could say that anarchism is a movement of struggle against all forms of oppression with the aim of ever greater freedom. So what form does the anarchist organization take? Oh, sorry. Yeah, so anarchism opposes all forms of oppression, and that's the kind of driving force that we anarchists see drives history forward. It's the anger of the oppressed building to the point where it can no longer be contained by the forces of repression of the state and capitalism, and it bursts out and overcomes that system to create a new, more freer world. A revolutionary world, a revolution that looks to build a free society based on the self-managed economy. So what's the role of the anarchist organization? I would say the anarchist organization is an organizational force within the broader working class struggle. It's not a leadership role, it's an organizational force. I mean, I've been involved in trade unions much of my life, and my experience of leaders, the only place to lead you is up the garden path, really. So it's not a leadership role. I'm just checking what I was going to say. I've got some notes in front of me. So it's not a leadership role. The form the anarchism takes under capitalism is a union. The union is a unifying force in that we all face, we all have to work, live, to eat in capitalism, and so we all suffer with that overarching form of oppression. What has a black woman got in common with me as a white heterosexual man? What has a disabled person got in common with an able-bodied person? Is we've all got to eat, we've all got to live. And under capitalism, there's only two ways of doing that. You either work or you claim benefits, unless you've got a lot of money, which I expect you won't be on this YouTube if you had. So yeah, we've all got to eat, we've all got to work. And there's only two ways, and that's a shared experience. In work of oppression, a shared experience of oppression. In work, if you disobey the boss, you get sacked. On the dole, if you disobey your work coach, whatever they call them now, you'll get your benefit sanction. So that's a common experience, yeah. That's what unites us for. That's an overarching form of struggle that unites all elements of society. So anarchism as a union, its primary role, therefore, is to struggle for better paying conditions for workers. Well, that's not its only role. The anarcho-syndicalism is overtly political. In that, we're probably unique. It's only anarcho-syndicalism joins the political struggle to the economic struggle. And the reason we do that is because that's the reality of things. Oppression, inequality, poor conditions, low pay, all systemic to capitalism. You can't get rid of inequality and oppression without getting rid of capitalism. Inequality is the symptom, and capitalism is the cause. So they have to be fought together, yeah. They have to be challenged together. If you look at the reformist trade unions or the traditional trade unions, they concentrate on the day-to-day issues. They leave wider concerns about wider change in society to the Labour Party historically. They concentrate on working conditions, improving conditions, which is fine in periods when capitalism is booming. When capitalism booming, as in the 50s, 60s, and 70s, militant trade unions, and it was, managed to drive down inequality during that period. The problem started when capitalism went into deep recession. And having no sort of alternative to capitalism, you become caught in the logic of capitalism, for example. So you end up with this position where you start negotiating over redundancies. You know, this thing, well, great news, they're only going to make 50 people redundant instead of 100, and you get sucked into that logic of it all in a downward spiral. I mean, I remember I had two mates of mine were shop stewards at Chloride, which was a big factory in Manchester. You know, they were good people, militant, and they were starting to negotiate over redundancies. You know, it was just a gradual thing where more and more were getting made redundant. And I remember saying to them, you know, well, you know, what you're doing? And they said, well, we don't think we've got an alternative. And that's the whole point. If you limit yourselves to the horizons of just paying conditions, when capitalism goes into shit street, you've no alternative to it. And if you take the opposite spectrum, the socialist parties, in this case, the Labour Party, in relation to trade unions, the political parties, the Labour Party, always did argue that they would go to get elected to Parliament, they would change the system and use the state to bring about change. Well, the reality is that when you enter Parliament, you don't change it, it changes you. You get seduced into the system. You know, when Labour used to actually send kind of working class militants, you know, they used to go there, you know, committed to making change, and the next minute, they swear in allegiance to the Queen. That's not their fault. That's just the way that you get sucked into the system. And as the more you get sucked in, the more your politics become corrupted, to the point where you get this nonsense of you know, as soon as you get in power, the main worry you've got about is retaining power. If you get lose power, then aim is getting back into power. And it becomes a circus with whatever her name is, Laura Cumsberg, whatever her name is, tell about gossip, what's happening in Parliament. It just becomes a charade, a pantomime. In opposition to this electoral politics, anarcho-syndicalism advocates direct action. Now, we just don't advocate direct action because it's the most effective means of struggle. If you want to win, you use direct action, both in the workplace and the streets. We use direct action because it's the only means through which workers can control their own struggle. If you put it into the hands of politicians, union leaders, or nowadays lawyers, you lose control. It's the expert telling you what to do, not you. So direct action is the only way of controlling your own struggle. And through that struggle, through self-organization, workers begin to get the confidence in their ability and learn the skills, which then develops into a broader culture, a culture based on solidarity and mutual aid, a culture that can go forward and begin to put at threat the whole system, just like militant trade unionism did in 1970s. So it puts at threat the whole system to the point where it can replace the system. It can overcome through direct action, through the general strike, can break the power of the repressive force of the state to herald a new and more equal society, or equal society. At the very sort of the centre of the anarcho-syndicalist union is the local, based in the local community, a building that signifies and reflects the kind of methods and means of anarcho-syndicalism. That local, based in the community, it looks to be the focus of struggle within that community. Struggles in the workplace, struggles in the community, and the wider struggles against homophobia, sexism, racism. So it becomes a focal point within the local community for all forms of action, which then develops the organisation to the point where we can begin to organise more and more action, which in turn creates a culture of solidarity and mutual aid, which can then go and challenge it and herald a new society based on democracy, not state or capitalist society, a new society that's based on democratic control of the workplace, and of the economy on the basis of need, not profit. I just want to kind of finish here because I don't want to talk too long. To me, this is a kind of best and worst times, really. I mean, if 30 odd years ago you said to me we'd be having things like 0-hour contracts, things like that, I would have thought you were mad. We've got growing inequality, all against a background of climate change, which threatens the whole existence. But on the plus side, over the last few years, we've seen the birth of all sorts of struggles: Extinction Rebellion, Black Lives Matter, the continual struggle for LGBT plus rights, and all these organisations are based on democratic control and direct action. So to me, they're kind of there halfway towards anarcho-syndicalism. So from our perspective, we are now in the process of launching ourselves as a union, because we think it's never been a better time. In the past, we've been reluctant to start organising as a union because of, in my time, the control, the power of the reformist unions. But later, I think we should have launched ourselves a union earlier. But now we're in the process. We feel that the wind of change is behind us, despite all the inequality and all the rest of it. So we feel it's behind us, and we are going to hopefully go forward and begin to expand at a reasonably rapid rate. And that's about it, really. A bit iddly-piddly, but they are. Yeah, I can't. You may have seen I'm not looking at the screen much. That's because I've got problems with my eyes. I'm falling apart, really, as you can see on the screen. But I think if you want any questions or ask any questions, a member of SS will read them out to me because I can't read them on the screen. A bit pathetic, really, but they are.
I'm just giving this a few minutes, Tony, because there's a wee bit of a delay between the Zoom and the YouTube live stream. So hopefully people are taking a moment to reflect and think about questions and stuff as well. I was just wondering whether Tony or Jacques as well, would you like to just talk a bit more about Solidarity Federation and kind of how you organize in different places and stuff?
Yeah, the Solidarity Federation organises on the basis of local groups. I mean, we call them locals because that is that we hope to kind of evolve them into actual locals with local offices in the community, which, as I say, will be the focal point of struggle. We're a decentralised organisation, which each local of SF having control over the immediate struggle in their area. We're decentralised on the basis that it's more democratic, and the fact that people living in their immediate locality know what's best, rather than some leader sat somewhere in an office. So we're democratic in that way. So we organise on the basis of locals. We have 2 federal conferences each year which decide things. Each local gets 1 vote. Despite how many members they've got. I mean, that's a bit different from the kind of bourgeois kind of 1 person, 1 vote. We do that on the basis that to ensure democratic control locally, because if you've got 15, 16, 20 people in 1 local and you have 1 vote each, and a local in another part of the country has just 3 vote seats. If you go 1 person, 1 vote, it'll be the big locals dictating in effect what the little locals can do. So it's one local per vote. Any local can submit a motion to our federal conferences, and we try to reach decisions on the basis of consensus rather than minority, which we generally do. We run training, we run housing training, and we also run workplace organizer training. At the moment, we've got 3 training courses going. We've got the general workplace organizer training, we've got the women's orientated organizer training, and we've got a care workers training in development. Those training courses are based on a direct actionist approach to struggles in the workplace. As I say, we are moving towards now declaring ourselves a union, which we hope to do over the next 6 months. I mean, in recent years, we've been concentrated more on housing struggles and workplace struggles. This has took the form largely of individual cases coming along with problems with their landlords or problem with their bosses. And so we've been quite successful at that. We use pickets, social media and all the rest of it to put pressure on managers and landlords and owners of companies and landlords. as I say, we'll be now looking to form union branches within the workplace and housing groups within the community. We're also a member of the IWA, which is International Workers Association. We've got sections, as we call them, in Asia, Europe, South America, and we're probably the only international organisation that can coordinate direct action across the world, which we're pretty proud of, really. I mean, it's just as a recent example, there's a general strike in Colombia at the moment, which has been suppressed violently by the state, and we've been organising pickets because we have a group in Colombia. We've been organising pickets in Britain and across Europe and South America and other parts of Asia in support of them. We've done that over issues like that. We've done it over strikes, over Uber drivers in the Philippines. They had a big dispute, and again we organised pickets and demonstrations where we were able to. We're only a tiny organisation, but for our size, I think we do really well. We're really active. So yeah, that's about it.
That's great. Thank you, Tony. And we've got a few questions from YouTube, so I'll get started with those. And somebody's asking, in your opinion, what is the main difference between radical socialist trade union action and anarcho-syndicalism?
I mean, the main difference between radical socialist trade unionism is that most, in my experience, socialist trade unionism is a bit stinted. The militants in the workplace organise militant action, and then any of the broader struggle is then left to the socialist parties. There's a divide, that artificial divide between means and ends, between the economic struggle and the political struggle. The Anarcho-Syndicalist organisation seeks to constantly link those two struggles together. We constantly look to take militant action, but constantly linking it to the idea that you have to bring about fundamental change. And someone who's organised in the workplace for years and years, that ain't a big jump, because when you start organising against the employer, it soon gets to a point about power. It's them, and I wish I'd have a pound for every time I've heard this from a manager. It's their right to manage. That is what they always argue. And you say, well, fuck that. We're not accepting that. So you're challenging power. And so you're taking it, you take it further. If you expand that further, you're not just challenging the power of the management in the workplace, not just challenging the power of the employer, you're challenging the power of the state and the employer. So it works through. So we try to constantly keep those two things together. We are an overtly revolutionary union. Militant socialist unions are not, because of the artificial divide, because you concentrate on the workplace, and then it's vote labour is the solution to everything else.
That's great. Thank you, Tony. And we've got a question here from Gemma from the IWW.
Yeah.
About the rationale behind pursuing legal union recognition.
Legal union recognition in this country is a bit odd, because I don't want to bore everyone to death with employment laws, but legal recognition, you get it through the certification officer, who's there to supposedly to ensure that you're an independent union. It's a bit of a throwback, really. Other than that, you can become a union. The idea of getting recognition, I'm not sure by the state or by the employer, but by the employer, I think that the danger of getting recognition by the employer is you get sucked into a kind of collective bargaining procedure, which and you get into a system where you get local officials constantly meeting with management, and they get cut off from the workplace. So I think it leads rise to a bureaucracy. So I think that personally, recognition at a local level, it's far better to try to pursue workplace struggles, no matter how small they are, where you give people confidence and confidence to take increased struggle. And you get recognized then by the power of your organization, not through some state procedure or ballot and all the rest of it, where it's a state ultimately, if you get legally recognized in the workplace, it's a state that's backing your union recognition and not the actual power of the workforce.
Yeah, I think, sorry, I may not have got the question across very well. I think what Gemma was asking about was in terms of what you were mentioning in terms of Solidarity Federation seeking recognition.
Oh, with the state. I mean, we're going to debate that really, but I mean, as I say, recognition of the state tantamount to being you paid 150 quid and then you get recognised as a union. But I mean, the fundamental thing that more fundamental of that is, and we haven't had that debate yet, but we are going to try and organise on the basis, not through the legal system, not through grievance procedures and legal strikes. We are going to try and organise on the basis of direct action. And obviously, if that's deemed illegal, and just about any action in the workplace is deemed illegal now, we will then run up against the laws which will which actually got sacked under the 1992 Act. 4 of us got sacked working on the railways. When you take unofficial action that's not got a ballot, the union then gets onto you, which they did to us, and repudiates your action. So that leaves you like isolated on your own. And the reason that the unions repudiate action because they're shit scared of losing all the millions and millions of pounds that they've got, which would be sequestrated. So as a union, we will be, as far as we're concerned, that isn't a threat to us, because if we formed an unofficial action and if the courts argue that the courts say that we've got to stop that action or face sequestration, we won't be repudiating any action. They can have our funds. We haven't got that much anyway. So that's a kind of model of organising the workplace that runs counter to recognition and use of employment laws as a means of organising action.
That's great. Thank you, Tony. And we've got quite a few other questions here. We'll see how much we managed to get through today. We've got someone here, first of all, thanking you for a great talk, and then asking, how would you respond to an argument that they personally disagree with, that it's impossible to organize effectively without an elected steering group or something similar?
An elected steering group? What, in the workplace? Yep. Sorry, I'm asking you questions you probably don't know. Elected steering group in the workplace, I don't know what that really is, really. I mean, there's joint shop stewards kind of groups that then you could, or a shop stewards group, which would be kind of an elected steering group during a dispute, yeah, or during an action. I mean, the way we organise and the way I've organised on building sites and the railways was that we organise around meetings. So if you've got a problem, if people have got a problem, we organise meetings, and there's generally people look to organise meetings, and often that can be unofficial who aren't stewards, because shop stewards can get detached and become kind of a reactionary force. So we organise around meetings. So you have a meeting, you decide what to do, you plan your action, You delegate tasks. The meeting delegates tasks. You think of ideas. It becomes a very dynamic situation, a kind of disputes meeting. And just to think about going on about confidence, it's remarkable when workers actually get, for the first time probably ever, to meet as workers to discuss their problems when you're new and you're getting first organising disputes, how much confidence they get and how much they, on the back of that confidence, they can actually organise and participate. So yeah, we basically, rather than steering groups, it's always meetings, and that's how. If you have a problems a meeting, if the dispute's going wrong, you have a meeting. If you come up with an offer, you have a meeting. So it's meetings rather than steering groups. And obviously you get figures within that who are probably better at organising, but that's somewhat different than leading, because leaders in the workplace, like everywhere else, come and go. So you need a vitalic, some other word for vitalic, a active workplace organisation that can organise around meetings. So that's the way to do it, rather than electing a steering committee, which then acts above the kind of above the workplace, and can get quite easily, and I've seen it too many times, sucked into and corrupted by management. So I hope that answers that.
Thanks, Tony. And we've got another question, which was about whether you're concerned about liberal co-option of groups like Extinction Rebellion, and where political radicalism is overwhelmed by more reformist tendencies. And how do you guard against this?
Yeah, well, the state is pretty good, and Catherine's pretty good at co-opting groups. And as much as I admire, and I've been involved to a degree in Extinction Rebellion, I think that you have to have a broader perspective of how you're going to organise and what your aim is. So I think that I personally don't think that climate change is going to be solved within the capitalist structure. So I think Extinction Rebellion has to develop a revolution perspective and run democratically, so you don't get elites forming within the organisation. So yeah, a revolution perspective and a democratic structure. And I also think that they have to kind of reach out and go beyond just climate change. They have to connect with all sorts of struggles to kind of broaden the struggle and get a culture of resistance, basically, within society.
Thanks, Tony. And sorry, just a second. We're getting quite a few different questions from YouTube. Thanks, everyone. Hopefully, we've got slightly more time to get through them. So we've got a question from someone else about what is the best way for someone who is not in traditional work to get involved?
If you're not in traditional work, there's all sorts of ways you can get involved, really. As I say, everyone lives somewhere, so there's housing struggles. If you've got, if you're on benefits, we organise around universal benefits. We have women's groups within it, LGBT plus groups within it. So yeah, I mean, one of the problems with the trade unions in the 70s was that it become one-legged. It can focus solely on the workplace to the exclusion, apart from probably mining, to the exclusion of the wider struggle. So the idea that you can just concentrate on the workplace is a weakness, a big weakness, because in struggles today, you need the wider support of the community. And also, if you don't have a broad support and organise within the community, you're reducing people to just kind of support networks for the workplace. So in every area of life, I think that there's need, and virtually I would argue that capital's like a kaleidoscope of oppression, really. So everywhere people are, they face some form of oppression, and the best way to do it is to get organised, meet with other people in a similar situation, and try and fight that repression head on.
Thanks, Tony. And the next question we've got was from someone about what the difference was between anarcho-syndicalism and council communism or working class anarchism. I know we're getting into theoretical things probably as much as practical, but
as an organisation, and as Salford and me in particular, I don't really like sectional kind of sectarian disputes. I mean, I would say anarchism is a broad church, from the Labour Party, a broad church, yeah. We should actually we should organise and work with each other. That having been said, I would say that there's a big difference, and they're not a big difference. Council communism, it depends what you mean by council communism. Council communism, you know, in Germany in the early 20th century, was actually organising around in unions. So it was very close to anarcho-syndicalism, probably not much between them. There is another variant of council communism, though, which kind of drifts into Marxist determinism. The idea that, you know, everything's reformist and everything you do is reformist, and basically the only thing you've got to do is be a propaganda group, propaganding revolution till it breaks out through capitalism by itself falling apart. So I think there's differences there, but we've had council communists where I live in Manchester since I first got involved, and we've always got on with them. But we do have differences. Anarchism in general, I would argue that anarchism in general, if it's an anarchist federation, I think there's room for anarchist federations and anarcho-syndicalist unions, depending on the local circumstances. Obviously, anarchism got different variants in it. Some are close to anarcho-syndicalism and some aren't, but I would still see them part of the same movement myself.
Thanks, Tony. And the next question we've got was someone asking about the anarcho-syndicalist view about voting and if voting changes anything fundamentally.
I'll just get down my Labour poster, but I'll hide it before you see it, yeah? If you want fundamental change, and we've got 100 and whatever years of the Labour Party, and at one point you could argue that the Labour Party was a genuine socialist party, and so far we've apart from the health service, which was started by the Liberals anyway, and started as a means of in some ways co-opting workers away from radical ideas. Apart from the health service, you haven't got much to look at really. So personally speaking, I don't vote. I couldn't bring myself to vote, but I'm fairly, if people want to vote because they think it's going to bring about some change or some improvement, obviously there's difference between the Labour Party and Tory Party. So yeah, if people want to vote, that's up to them really, but don't vote with the idea that you're going to bring about fundamental change. It's just a nonsense. So yeah, I might get shot by my own organisation after saying that, I don't know.
Hopefully not. Sorry, I'm just double checking here on the chat that I haven't missed any questions for yourself. And I know Jacques was typing out just in the Zoom chat as well. Do you have any examples of where anarcho-syndicalism was in use that you wanted to share today?
In use? Well, as I say, the IWA, it's in use across the world, really. I mean, syndicalism in Britain was a big movement in the early 1900s, 1900 to 1914. And there's one source of, if people want to see how, and syndicalists, to me, the way it organised and that lasted right up to the 70s and 80s with its distrust of leaders and democratic organisation and all the rest of it, distrust of full-time officials. So it had a lasting influence, really. And of course, you've got the 1936 Spanish Revolution, where the forces of anarchism, in parts of Spain at least, defeated the forces of fascism. And the big thing to me about the Spanish Revolution is that the economy worked. Workers' control worked there. It brought massive improvement in a very short space of time to the way the economy is run. It was able to supply food and arms to fight fascism. So it was arming it was feeding the population and arming the forces fighting fascism. And to me, if you compare that with state socialism, where the state rather than workers run society, it ended up in a catastrophe. It was so inefficient, it alienated people because they tried to enforce it from above, that it resulted in it resulted in millions of people starving through lack of food. So I think there's a good kind of contract between the Spanish Revolution and the Russian Revolution.
That's great. Thank you, Tony. And another question was, how does anarcho-syndicalism relate to control of funds for workers?
Sorry?
How does anarcho-syndicalism relate to control of funds for workers?
Okay. Funds?
Funds, yeah.
Funds, sorry. I couldn't hear your accent, sorry.
No, you're fine.
I'm deaf as well as blind, so that doesn't help. But funds, yeah. We have a system of funds. Well, funds, we don't have any, so that's not a big problem. But funds is each local pays each person in a local pays a set fund, which they can use within their own local. They decide their own local funds to meet their own local needs. We then have a fund that goes, that everyone pays, which goes to things like publications, things like that, yeah, organising conferences, things like that. And part of that national fund also goes to the IWA. So we pay, most of the funds is paid locally and controlled locally. A part is paid to the national treasurer, which is used to organise conferences, organise a training courses, things like that. And part goes to the IWA, which organises international conferences every 2 years. Yeah, so that's how our funds are done. I mean, we don't like, we're pretty mistrustful of building up funds. We don't have any paid officials around like that. So, because money, like always, corrupts. If you have massive funds, one, the state can seize them if you take action, and two, it does lead to corruption. So we try to raise funds and spend them, so we don't have massive amounts of resources. I partly paid for my house, but we don't talk about that anyway.
That's it. Thank you. Jacques, did you have anything to add to that as well?
Thanks. No, that's great. It's actually, that was just what I was getting at with that question is, even in strikes, we raise money along with the consciousness of supporting the strike, the broader community supporting the strike, other workers in other industries, not only taking strike action if we can push for that, but also solidarity strikes, but also the actual funds which are helping those people on strike are raised by the struggle, by the workers themselves in the struggle. So yeah, that's good. Yeah, that's excellent. I have no further questions. Maybe there's one other question I see on the YouTube channel concerning how people might want to get in touch with us. We have a website which is salford.org.uk, and from that website you have locals which can individually be contacted, or you can contact the contact point, which is the Federal Secretary of Solidarity Federation. Yeah, we also on the website have a whole lot of pamphlets and booklets dealing with specific struggles that workers have had in the tube, railway tube in London. There's one on workmates, which organizing on an anarcho-syndicalist basis. We've got pamphlets on stuff your boss doesn't want you to know, concerning sexist bosses, as well as general workplace rights that people have. There's leaflets on cleaning workers, on how to organize and their basic health and safety rights. And we've got some new publications that we just decided at our conference yesterday. Well, another new publication which we're going to be endorsing. So that would be great. Anything else you were going to say?
Me or yeah, I just want to stress that anyone who wants to get involved in the do the workplace organizer training, please get in touch with us. It's done in a very relaxed way and a collective way, so we kind of share ideas and develop the course together. So if you're interested in workplace organizing, or you like to know more about it, please get in touch, and it'd be great.
That's great. Thank you so much, both Jacques and Tony, today from Solfed, and that's going to be us wrapping up today.
Thanks for all your help. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's